Hello, I'm Carl Stabe, and today we have Vincent Wanga with me. I'm so excited because he's the author of The Art of Direction. It's personal perspectives on the path to leadership. First, we start with the 5 minute system segment. So, what is your 5 minute system that you've implemented?
So one of the favorite things, because I am a creative executive, so I work with a lot of creatives, but also a lot of non-creative executives. So I'm a huge fan of creative facilitation for that reason. It's not a new framework. This was something that Ideal developed, in the early aughts. But the reason it's so important, specifically in my context, is anytime you have two groups that don't speak the same language, like business stakeholders and creatives, or marketing and sales, it's a great bridge to create relations that can get them to communicate towards a common goal. It's also a fun exercise and a workshop that people tend to use to facilitate an outcome of mutual benefit. So I'll give you an example. I was once doing a branding campaign for an agency to rebrand a major law firm in Minneapolis. So these are lawyers. They're very busy. They're very expensive. They have billable hours, and the last thing they want to do is get in a room and start talking about branding. They don't care. So I came up with a creative facilitation where I could get them to come to my level and understand the importance of this for their firm. So the first thing I did is lawyers love chairs, right? They spend a lot of time in their chairs. They're very expensive chairs. And I put a series of 5 or 6 chairs up at the beginning of the boardroom. One was an old riveted chair like you'd see in a traditional law firm. There's a modern Herman Miller chair that you could see, in an architect studio, and a bunch of other chairs that varied from those other chairs. So I asked them quite simply, as a law firm, for you personally, which chair represents your law firm today? And I had them go up and select a chair and then talk about why they believe that chair represents their law firm. And then I had them choose which chair represents their law firm aspirationally. And I had given attributes to each of these chairs so they could think about it. And it's funny, as they started talking about the difference between their aspirations for the law firm versus what their current reality was for the law firm, they started arguing with each other and they started coming to a consensus and debating. And before you know it, they're talking about branding. They're talking about the essence of their law firm and getting to an outcome. And they came to a consensus that helped us get the information we needed to have a successful branding outcome. This was scheduled to be 45 minutes. We went an hour and a half. They loved it so much. So my point is using creative facilitation to create relational bridges to people who don't necessarily speak the language of your constituents or your team or your agency was a really great way for me to get the insights I needed to get them excited and participate in something otherwise would have been much more difficult to get the insights I needed to come to the conclusions that we did for that project. So that's just one of many examples of how I use creativity to help facilitate workshops.
I love that. Yes, too often we have these nebulous ideas in our head, but when we actually put physical things in front of us, like chairs, it helps us put in these ideas into words that are just bouncing around our brains so we can actually have these more fruitful discussions.
Absolutely. And the important sequence that made that successful is that these were objects they could relate to. I didn't have to over explain what the riveted chair meant. That meant, did you want to be a traditional old school law firm or the Herman Miller chair? Do you want to be a more modern law firm for the times? So by creating objects that they can already relate to, it really helped the facilitation move forward. And I didn't have to over explain the analogy. They really got the metaphor and really ran with it.
I love that. And I think too is we are wired for stories, and every chair that we see reminds us of our granddad or reminds us of, and that helps that facilitation throughout that workshop. That's awesome.